Welcome to Slight Reliability, the show where we learn SRE and observability 1 week at a time. I'm Stephen Townsend. Welcome back to Slight Reliability. I'm Stephen Townsend, and this is the show where we learn about SRE and observability 1 week at a time. Today, I am here with Praveen Kasam, who's an expert in site reliability engineering. He works for Diconium Digital Solutions, and he has the responsibility of being a technology leader for the SRE and service management team. He is part of and has driven several SRE transformations, which is exciting for me because that's the goal of a lot of organizations around the world right now, and it's great to hear the experience from someone who's done it. So, Praveen, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me in your podcast. I'm excited.
So you're based in Germany, right?
Yeah.
And what does Diconium Digital Solutions do?
We are a service provider company. So we help big manufacturing companies or big companies to digitalize their companies, right? So and we provide IT services and solutions, and we build products for them as a service-based company. Yeah.
So I'm interested to talk about SRE transformation because I'm sure it is a different thing in different organizations and it changes, but I'm keen to hear your story, journey at a high level in your career, because you started out as a developer, right? Tell us about that journey from developer to SRE to consulting about SRE.
My name is Praveen Kasam, born and brought up in India, and did my graduation in computer science engineering. Just like every average engineer at that time in India, I also landed up in IT. It's not that I was burning to get into IT, but it was that I had to join IT. And I was working as a Java developer for 3-4 years, and where we were building huge e-commerce platforms for big multinational companies in United States. One fine day, I was introduced with an opportunity to travel to Germany to work for a company that is Diconium. I found it exciting, interesting, challenging. So I thought, why not? Let's try. So I came to Germany, and then, as you might have guessed it already, so I was working as a Java developer where we were building the same e-commerce solutions for a big automobile manufacturing company, which is luxurious brand. You know, the German brands are known for luxury. So we were building an e-commerce platform, right? So, and I was working as a developer. It was working out really well, and it was really challenging and interesting, and I was enjoying it. However, there was one thing which was bugging me a lot. There are a lot of interruptions, and there are a lot of outages, and there are a lot of P1, P2 incidents, and there was the operations team used to disturb us quite a lot of time and bugging us, and then they were kind of disturbing the flow of delivering something great to the product by usual operational challenges. So I thought
So at that point, as a developer, what was your perspective of the operations team?
To be honest, as every other developer who hasn't seen the world on the other side, I was also looking down on them, because they are coming with the trivial questions. Hey, that's a common sense. Why is he asking me that question? Or hey, come on, if I am going to analyze the problems and if I'm going to do your work, why your role is there, and so on. And there are a lot of things that and the frequent disturbances, right? So I was not focusing on innovation, building something, because I was being dragged into escalations and incident analysis and so on. So that was really a challenging thing.
And how did you go from that point? You're a developer, you're being interrupted by the ops team because they need help to figure things out. How do you find yourself in the ops team? Did you put your hand up? Did someone sort of say, can you please help us?
As a developer, you think, at least I was thinking that I'm these operations are a bunch of idiots, and it's my job now to go and there and save the world and help them to set the operations right in the right way and help them to standardize the things there. And that's when I realized that I decided that, okay, I want to land into operations, and then I joined the operations team. Yeah.
Okay. When we caught up a couple of weeks ago, or maybe last week it was, you mentioned that when you first moved into operations, quite quickly, you saw a bunch of opportunities to improve things. So what kind of things did you observe that were happening in that operations space?
It was not even months. It's in weeks that I realized the sheer amount of the workload that they are having, and then the toil that they are handling, and the frequent interruptions that they are going through, and the lack of product knowledge within the operations team, and a lot of the logs are scattered. And then there is not enough tools and information and the knowledge to troubleshoot the problems and so on. Well, when I question myself, all those are not built by the dev team, right? And then that's when I realized that, okay, operations is not that easy of a task.
Yeah, I was curious about the challenges that operations were having and the sort of contributing factors. I guess one of them is that if you're in a separate operations team and you're not, collaborating with or part of a dev and ops together kind of team, you're lacking that application knowledge that would make it much harder to deal with issues. Was that part of it?
Yeah, well, it's a classic dev and ops setup, right? So like the dev team was focusing on building features, and operations was involved 2 days before go live. That hey, come on, we are pushing something to the production, and then it's your job to care, right? And then operations team used to cry a lot that hey, your system is not stable enough, and they were talking more on the feelings, right? So the system was not stable enough, and we are having a lot of outages, and please don't push any more code. And then there is a rift, right? Because dev was incentivized for the velocity that they bring, and operations is incentivized with the reliability that they can keep, right? And conflicting goals, conflicting ideas, and then because of that, there was no shared understanding and collaboration, and which made the situation worse. Yeah, because if you're paying someone only for velocity, he don't focus on reliability, or like it's a second priority, and then the opposite.
Okay, so what kinds of things? And I know this is before you had sort of looked into SRE, I'm guessing.
Of course.
What kinds of things did you help or think about or implement to sort of improve the situation?
Since I was a developer and I was working on the product, right? So there are a couple of things I quickly looked into. So I was looking for opportunities where we can automate the things, so which can reduce the workload, right? So then I was looking at automating some of the incident handling processes, or automating some of the communication processes, and automating some runbooks and so on. The runbooks is a SRE term, but at least automating some of the monitoring and responses to that topic and so on. That was one of the first thing that I was doing. The second thing, what I was doing is, like, since I was a developer, I'm much closer to the code, right? And I dig deeper into the code and try to analyze the problem on a code perspective, and then try to educate the operations team in how they can troubleshoot in that aspect. So to bringing them more closer to the engineering aspects and the code aspects of a product. So that was also paying off really well. And then devs started seeing us really differently, because earlier we were asking them, hey, there is a incident, can you help us? Now there is an incident, this is the root cause, what we think is, and we are suggesting this is a fix for that incident, so that close the incident and so on. So then it's eye level communication was started establishing with the dev teams because of that extra effort that we as an operations team was putting in, and then we were speaking in the same language, if I have to say.
Yeah. No, I've seen a similar situation in testing, between testing and development. I used to do performance testing for a long, long time. And like, I'll just stick to performance testing. You run a load test and you see something is slow. If you go to a bunch of developers and say, this thing is slow, they're just going to moan and go, now I have to go and figure out what the problem is. But if you can spend some time as a performance tester to have the right monitoring in place, to be analyzing the patterns of data, to come back and say, hey, this is the specific behavior I'm seeing, and based on the logs or the tracing or whatever it is, and I think this is where the problem is, they're much more willing to have a conversation. And you sort of build that sort of shared understanding and sort of shared respect for each other, I think, too. Yeah, so it sounds like it's kind of similar between dev and ops in a way.
Of course. Yeah, of course. But at least in our case, right? So like there was no operations engineer which was closer to the code of that particular product, right? So me being from the other side was helping a lot to bring that common understanding or shared language and so on. Yeah.
Well, there you go. There's two. If anyone out there who's thinking about and implementing SRE, there's two things you could do before you even look up SRE. Look at what you can automate, and think about educating or uplifting the ops team so that they understand the application better. I mean, to me,
Exactly.
that sounds like great advice. I have one more question before I ask about SRE. In this new role, as coming from a developer background, were you finding you were getting to write enough code, or that you are still enjoying the work?
In operations, no, I think I briefly touched about that I landed in IT, but it was not my will or my interest and so on, right, in the beginning. So I think this is a time that I can reveal, right? So I was not, I was working in dev part and I was building something, but it was not giving me enough job satisfaction or that was not my why to right. So once I landed in operations, it was more challenging and interesting, right? And I was getting more fulfillment from my work because there is a problem and you don't know what is the fix and what is the root cause, and you don't have enough insights to look into, and then it's like a treasure hunting, right? So like and finding a needle in a haystack, right? And it was more fulfilling for me because I was seeing myself as a problem solver, right? When everyone when there is an outage and there are a lot of management attention and client attention and everyone is looking up to you to solve the problem, and if you are the one who contribute to the solving of that problem, it's more fulfilling. It's more challenging also because you will be VP level people in the bridge calls and asking you what is the status and so on. But for me, that is my why, right? So once I landed in operations, that's where I ever since I landed in operations. In the beginning, I thought I wanted it to be 3 months or 6 months tenure that I can uplift the operations team and train them and then come back to the dev team. But again, it's already been 7 years that more than 7 years that I have been in or operations field.
At what point did you get introduced to site reliability engineering as a concept?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I was telling that, right? So I was telling the story that like we were building an e-commerce platform. It was more or less a distributed monolith, right? So, and then it was like that. My engineering skills and my approach was enough for that particular product because like you can find one or two senior developers in the product who can bridge the gap if operations team don't have the understanding and so on. So as there will be a twist in every story, our organization was bought by another e-commerce manufacturing group, where so that then the current e-commerce manufacturer group has to cancel the contract, and then we have to build a new e-commerce platform for the another manufacturing group. But here in this case, we have to build a huge e-commerce platform for 5 different brands in the group. So we have to build a platform, e-commerce platform, and this architecture was more distributed. It's a distributed system, microservices architecture. So the one guy thinking with the engineering aspect into the operations was not enough because of the scale and because of the complexity that the system brings. And it was more challenging for us to navigate through the operational challenges of the complex systems because, as I said, like there is no one developer in the whole system who knows everything and who can bridge the knowledge gap and so on. And then I was briefly hinting about the about observability, right? Logs are being scattered and so on. So the challenge is much more in the distributed system when you have million pieces put together to provide one product, and you need much more observability to be able to solve the problem. That's when we are being overloaded and we are having a lot of toil. No matter how we automate and so on, it was not enough. We quickly realized the importance of being more closer to the dev, right? Even more closer than what we were. Then out of compulsion, I was doing some research and there got to be a better way to solve this problem. It should not be the only problem of us, right? There must be someone else in the world might have faced the same problem and have a solution, right? That's when I was introduced to the Google Site Reliability Engineering book. And then I took a weekend to read, and maybe 5-6 days I finished the book. And that's when I realized that, okay, from tomorrow we are doing SRE, right? So, but it was not that easy. As you know, any transformation takes several months. But yeah, so that's when I was introduced to site reliability engineering. Yeah.
Okay. I do want to hear a bit about that transformation journey and what you did. But just before that, When I think of SRE, there's different sort of components to it. I think of things like incident management and observability and SLOs and reducing toil and automation. Which sort of aspects of SRE have you found most applicable to your work, or is it all of it?
For me, my perspective a little bit higher level, right? So, like for me, SRE is more about mindset, and SRE is more about the practice, not as a rule. So my heart bleeds when someone says like, "Oh, we have hired an SRE, and then everything will be everything will be sorted, and everything will be solved." Right. So, for me, SRE is a holistic approach as a practice to have a right balance between velocity and reliability. This balance is much more important now than before, because earlier we were having more of a big monolith applications, and the scale of the products, or the scale of the systems was not that huge. When the whole world is transforming into digital world, the right balance between velocity and reliability is much more important. And site reliability engineering, for me, it's a guiding process and practice, which gives you the data-driven approach to make sure velocity and reliability is rightly balanced. As I mentioned earlier, right? So we were talking about feelings in operations team. Hey, your code is not stable enough, and we don't want you to push the code. And then there was a usual rift, right? There was no proper agreement between dev and ops, and then they were working on two different goals, and then that was a conflict, right? With site reliability engineering, if you do it well, that's important. If you do it well, you can have a proper SLOs and then proper agreements within the dev and ops team to make sure the devs can innovate as much as possible, as long as they are meeting the reliability goals. So that is one of the things which I really liked about site reliability engineering.
I can see that. So that shared agreement. This is the level of reliability that we're going to agree to, and you've signed up for this, developers. So if we all agree to 90% availability, then that's, if it's 91%, that's fine. Because we've all agreed that together. I like that. Moving on to the transformation itself. Maybe I'll start with the engagement model, because although there's one model explained in the Google book with sort of embedded, a centralized team which sort of farms out SREs to other teams to embed them. There's sort of there are other models. So you've got that centralized SRE teams, you've got embedded SREs in teams, you've got platform teams who focus on building tooling for self-service, and then you have the kind of team I was in, which is an enablement team. So we were more like consultants going out to teams to sort of help them uplift because they asked us to. What engagement model did you first try, and maybe have you tried other models since then?
Yeah, so as it is mentioned in a Google book also, right? There is no one size fits all, right? So you have to experiment with your own organization structure and with your organizational responsibility balance, and then have to try and experiment and work out. For me, because me being part of the transformation in our organization, and as well as consulting a couple of organizations, for me, what is more important is like, I'm strictly against the consulting approach. SRE as a consulting approach, like you are a consultant, right? So then you would end up preaching, but actually not having enough insights to do something to make the product more better, or to improve the life and work of an operations team, right? If you are being a consultant. For me, in my view, I always advocate that SRE is much more closer to the an organization. SRE much more closer to the ops team. So, and they should be the operations engineer who is firefighting and troubleshooting and identifying the problem, and then bringing it to the whole organization. That's my view on it. When we are talking about engagement models, as I said, we have to make sure what is right for our organization by experimenting. But I have evolved this engagement model. If time and budget and the size matter permits. So for me, whoever the work in a reliability aspect of a product, right, should be organizationally at one place, right, and then part of them work as a operations engineer who do firefighting 50% of their time, and remaining 50% of the time they have to automate and improve the observability and so on. That's one section of a reliability engineering team. There is another part of section of reliability engineering team will be embedded in DevOps teams. So their focus should be to gain the product knowledge towards the central SRE team and coach the developers on the operational challenges of the products that is going through and enabling reliability relevant features like adding fault tolerance or more error handling and so on the product development aspect. There is another section of the SREs I would see are the SREs who involve in the design of a solution, and then in the enterprise level or a solution level, who make sure that reliability is taken care from day zero, but not at the 2 days before go live and so on, right? So like this, with this pure setup, it's a right balance in my view to make sure site reliability engineering topics are addressed in every level and every aspect in a right way. So that's how I look at it. I don't know if you understood. Maybe if you haven't, please ask.
You're basically saying you think that for SRE to succeed, it needs to be close enough to both the code and the operations to be effective. And I think I tend to agree. I wasn't I was like an enablement team, which was quite different, right? But that was because there wasn't a willingness to sort of go fully into SRE. There was a really big organization with starting with 2 engineers, right? And so we were stretched very thin. So we had a choice. We could just join one team and help one team, or we could try and do a little bit across a lot of teams. And of course, so you've landed on a sort of an engagement model, which involves essentially embedding, at least getting SREs close enough to be with the operations and the code, like close enough to them to make sense of it, to be able to help. Once you're there are other kinds of barriers which prevent SRE transformation, which I'm well aware of. Things like priority and funding and culture and structure of teams. So my question is, how do you get traction? How do you get traction for SRE in an org where there isn't like a C-level exec saying, we're going to do SRE, but you're trying to make it happen from maybe a mid-level or a ground level?
So usually, right, so like if I study and if I understand it really well, in every organization, there are 2 or 3 people who starts with site reliability engineering. If they might have read about it, or they might have attended a podcast, or they might have attended a conference, and then that's a cool thing that we want to start, right? So in every transformation, what I thought when we were trying to implement it, what I thought was like, okay, it makes sense to me. It should make sense to everyone. From tomorrow, we get a budget, we get a funding, and we will transform the whole setup, right? But what was more challenging for me was 3 things, right? 1, creating awareness and desire in every level of organization, including VPs and including the management, and also the developers and POs. And then creating awareness and desire. That was one point. And the second point was changing the mindset of operations team from a classic reactive approach to a proactive approach, because it needs a lot of upskilling, it needs a lot of mindset switch, and it needs a lot of improvement needed. And then getting the buy-in of dev teams, because you see the relationship was not so good with the dev and operations team, right? Because they are looking down on them, and these guys are complaining about the quality of the code that they are pushing, right? To bring them more closer, and then those 3 were the challenging things, right? Once you achieve these 3, creating an awareness and desire, and then buy-in from every organization, right? Everything fall in place. So that was most challenging for me in the transformation, if I have to say.
You said something really interesting last time we spoke, and sort of elaborating on the point you just made. Find how SRE is going to benefit each kind of stakeholder. So if you're talking to an ops engineer, you might be saying, this is going to make your life easier because you're going to be automating away that toil. It's going to be you're going to be happier in your job. You talk to a developer and you're like, this is going to be great because
you will not be disturbed so much. And
exactly. You go to a developer and say, this is good for you because you're not going to get us disturbed as much by ops teams asking for help because everything's running smoother. And you might go to an executive or a VP and say, this is great for you because you have happier customers and more reliable, less incidents and more reliable software or services, or are you going to save money or speak their language? But that must be quite challenging to know what all different stakeholders want in an organization.
Exactly right. With my experience of transforming in our own organization, so I prepared this framework now. My framework says it's like whenever I involve in a consulting engagement to start SRE, I don't start immediately, right? So I try to do interviews because I try to do interviews with every other stakeholder in the organization. Try to understand what are their current pains with the existing setup of dev and ops setup, right? And whatever the setup they have. And then try to understand where the power balances and who's taking a decision and who's pushing who is prioritizing the topics and so on, right? Then I take all the inputs and then do a study and research, identify an answer to everyone's why. For example, product owner, why should I let an SRE be in my Scrum team to add some code to the code, right? Or why operations team should let an SRE come and preach them or help them and guide them and improve the operations efficiency and so on? And how does it help? As it was also nailing to the same topic that you were mentioning, right? Understanding everyone's why and preparing a bit of sales pitch, right? So to make sure how their problem's going to be solved with this approach, and including VP level, right? So hey, I understand that there are a lot of P1 incidents, and then you're getting a lot of customer complaints, and your sales are being dropped because of that. And then hey, I have a cool solution for you, and this is something that you can look into, and so on. So for me, whoever is in charge of a transformation, should try to do it really carefully and then try to put a lot of effort in understanding everyone's pain and preparing a proper pitch for everyone to make sure we get a buy-in. Well, getting a buy-in is one thing, and also delivering on the buy-in the other thing, right? For me, what is more important is we as a transformation leader, whoever we are involving in a transformation, we have to make sure we don't oversell and also we don't undersell. And then what you have to keep an eye on what you're promising with the transformation, and also have a clear roadmap and guideline and proper plan to make sure the SRE transformation becomes failure in 2 months or 3 months.
Okay, so one more question. There are people all around the world right now who are trying to begin their SRE journey and create SRE transformations in their organization. What's some, one or two pieces of advice to help those people get started that you would give them?
Well, I kind of answered that question in a little bit in a smaller details earlier, but for me, there are 4 advices that I can give. 1, be extremely patient, because transformation takes a lot of time, and then patience is one of the important skill that you have to have as a transformation leader. 2, be empathetic and listen everyone. Spend more time on listening than giving solutions, at least in the initial format, in the initial phase of a transformation, to understand the organizational structure and everyone's problem with the existing setup, and how we can solve with the SRE transformation. 3, genuinely care about their pains and solving them instead of trying to make sure, instead of selling or overselling and underselling. 3 and 4, be extremely ruthless in prioritizing. Identify those 20% tasks which will give you more buy-in from the organization than 80% rest of the tasks, right? And prioritize them and then deliver them. And 5, celebrate the successes that you deliver with each and every implementation, and market it well in a way that there is a good buzz and vibe going around SRE transformation, and to get everyone attracted. For me, what I do is I suggest to run a newsletter every 2 weeks that, hey, in the last 2 weeks, the quantitative data, right? Not qualitative data. So there were this many number of incidents, and this many automations are done, and this much of the time that we have saved, and so on, like that. So that give you more and more traction, and then one thing at a time, right? Start making tomorrow a little bit better than today, and within no time you will have a successful transformation.
Thank you so much, Praveen, for coming on the show. I personally love hearing from other practitioners out in the world actually doing this stuff. I think it's fantastic. And I think you dropped some absolute gems during this conversation. So thank you so much again for your time.
Thank you, Stefan. And it was a pleasure joining in and having a word with you. And I enjoyed it thoroughly.
And that's all from another episode of Slight Reliability. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I will see you next time.
Bye.